Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of The Script Department. This week, Brad and I were sent to the world premiere of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. And what a fun time we had. Didn't we have a fun time, Brad? It was good,
It
wasn't it?
was a lot of fun, wasn't it? Wasn't it a pretty special evening?
It was a really special evening. We took a stroll down the kind of creamy beige carpet. We met up with some very, very interesting creators, including friends of the show and Tolkien aficionados, The Broken Sword. We saw them there. We also got to hear some really stunning life advice from John Rhys-Davies, who played Gimli and Treebeard in Jackson's trilogy. That was fun, wasn't it?
He spoke for a while, didn't he? It's amazing.
He was really going for it. It was
Yeah.
so interesting. And then finally, we got to see the first two episodes of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, at the IMAX in Leicester Square. So it was very, very exciting, but all of it paled into insignificance next to actually meeting you in real life, Brad. How exciting was that?
We were in the same physical space. I was worried
Well,
we would end the universe, but it didn't happen. We
didn't
were
happen.
okay being in the same physical space, so it was good. Yeah, it was good to hang out
It
for
was.
a short period of time, not digitally, which was
Not
fun.
digitally, yeah. I could reach
Yeah.
out and touch your face. Not that you should do that to people if they
He
don't
did
say
it a
so.
lot as well. Anyone who's listening, touched my face a lot.
It got awkward. Sorry, Brad. I apologise. But we're going to chat about that, all of the Rings of Power stuff a little bit later on. So we're going to talk you through a little bit of what happened at the event and show you some dubiously shot footage. I did my best, but there's a reason I'm a writer and not a cinematographer. So if you're listening on this on your Spotify's or Apple's or whatever it is, pop over to YouTube and have a look at the footage, and you can get a kind of a feel for where we were and what we were doing. And once we chatted about the event itself, then we're going to get into the reason you're all really here, and we will give our take on the Rings of Power episodes 1 and 2. So before we get into that, let's play the music.
I've been to Leicester Square a lot, and I don't think I've ever seen it like that.
Yeah.
And I mean that. And it was a really big event. Like they'd taken over the entire centre of the square, and the only people who could see it were the people who were in there. So it was a select few. So it was a lovely experience. Meeting John Rhys-Davies was incredible.
Yeah.
And even Jeff Bezos walked past us. He didn't stop to talk though, unusually, but he was right there.
Yeah.
It was a very glitzy event, and they'd taken over 3 or more cinemas in the square, and there were premieres at all of them, and they were all enormous screens or IMAXs, and it felt there was a lot of scale to it. And as I was standing there watching these things happen, I was thinking, I hope the show lives up to this pomp and circumstance. And
100%.
we're probably going to talk about that soon, but
Talk about
spoilers, it kind of does live up to that. But what did you think of it?
Oh man, it was such a fun event. It was you're right, the set that they built and everything, this very, very beautiful and intricately designed kind of elven structure. There was, there were plants everywhere. It looked as though it had been overgrown with moss, and you had these natural trees that were shielding us from the little tiny bit of rain that threatened us on occasion. It was a really cool thing. A lot had been put into kind of building this, and for this big premiere. It had been screened all over the world. It had been screened in New York and all over the place, but this was the proper premiere. And you could really feel that, I think, in the attention to detail and the way it was designed. But also very cool to see the cast. A great many of the cast walked past. Morphy Clark, who plays Galadriel. Peter Mullen, I think, was there as well. Ishmael was there, who plays Arondir. A whole load of people.
He was very attentive to the fans, I found.
He was.
Like, he was really in there. He was like, "Yeah, I love you guys." Like, and there were, the people screaming, "Our favorite elf!" Like, he was very, he felt like a star immediately. And it's like, I'm sure some of these people are going to go on and be huge stars because of the size of this thing.
You do get the feeling that you were kind of witnessing the start of, not necessarily the start of their careers, but like because a lot of them have done a lot of really great stuff before this. But you do kind of get those younger actors. You do feel they're on the precipice of something here, and they have that energy about them. We also saw Lenny Henry. That was cool. Love to see Lenny Henry.
He was awesome. Yeah,
that was a nice thing. But no, it was a very, very, it was a cool experience, and I for one, very pleased to have been able to go along. Um, so yeah, it was a cool thing. So, but now the really important stuff, the reason we're here, really properly, Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 1, Episode 2. Brad, your take. How did you feel? I know how you felt because I've sat with you, but how did you feel walking out of that beautiful IMAX cinema in Leicester Square?
Well, the first thing I felt was full because I had so much of the free popcorn.
You did.
But other than that, like I was impressed. I went in seeing the scale of it. I was worried. I don't know if it was a subconscious tick in me going. Normally, if they're spending this much money on something, they're probably going to mess it up. But
Overcompensating a
it
bit, yeah.
feels like I've only seen 2 episodes, but it feels like they haven't messed it up. I watched Game of Thrones, which I love. I love Game of Thrones. I watched Game of
Mhm.
Thrones the next day, and it felt small.
Ah,
It's because the sets and the world they've built and everything in the Rings of Power is enormous. It
mhm.
is. It has a very, very epic feel. Akin to the first trilogy. Like
Yeah,
it is. It feels real. It doesn't feel like I know when the trailers came out, people thought, "Oh my goodness, they've shot it all on green screen,"
mm,
because it was previous. They hadn't finished the special effects, um, but they finished them, and they look
yeah,
amazing. Like it looks good. I mean, I will probably get to talking critically about the show if we can do at some
yeah,
point,
yeah, yeah,
but like my initial feeling of walking out of there was like, wow, I feel like I've just been wowed. That thing was enormous. That felt huge. They built.
yeah,
We were hearing one of the set designers speak on the night, and he was saying that they built 8 acres of set
yeah.
in New Zealand. 8 acres, like that
8
doesn't even
acres.
make sense. I mean, there's one shot where they're in the woods, and there's like arches that seem to just go back for like a mile. Like
Yeah,
it feels big. So
mm,
I left feeling very impressed. How about
yeah.
you, Marcus? What was your take on it?
Very similar, very similar. I think it's important, I think, to differentiate for the sake of the viewer and listener here that when we're talking about big and scale and things like that, we're not talking about it was big because we saw it on an IMAX, and so there was a physical size to it. But that's not what we're referring to here. What we mean is the level of detail, the level of craftsmanship, and the size of what is being shot, not the size of the screen itself. Um, the cynic in me wonders a little bit if perhaps the IMAX enhanced it somewhat. I mean, of course, it enhanced it. It would be ridiculous to say it didn't.
Yeah.
But I think that when you peel back the the kind of the glitzy exterior of that particular viewing platform, what you're left with is something really quite special. It feels I'm going to get in trouble again, right? I'm going to get in trouble again for saying this. I got caught so much flack for saying this when I spoke on the Broken Sword channel about this, but it feels like Middle Earth, um, which for me was a really important thing to
Mm.
come back to. And I think it's important to say as well, these first 2 episodes, firmly, this is an Act One sort of situation. We are setting up. We are setting up the world. We are welcoming back. We are looking at Middle Earth, but it's also a very different Middle Earth to the one we've seen before. This is set thousands of years prior to anything we've seen on the screen before. So we're setting up new
Mm.
rules, we're setting up new characters, we're revisiting younger versions of characters that we do know. There's a lot of stuff that these 2 episodes have to carry a great weight in terms of setting up. And I think they did it very well from a structural point of view and from a writing point of view, which is of course the point of us is to look at that specific angle there. So let's dive into it. The first thing that struck me is that you have this wonderful opener from Morfydd Clark, who plays Galadriel,
Mm.
who you have this wonderful voiceover, and it struck me immediately as okay, right? They've seen how this has worked with the Jackson movies. Because of course Galadriel opens that, and then we have her here again. We have Galadriel leading us once again into Middle Earth, but in a very different way. That really I got a little bit of a lump in my throat when that
Mm.
happened because it was quite special. Did you like that? Do you think that worked?
Yeah, I think there's a relative love letter here to Peter Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have paid tribute to what he's done. I don't want to compare. I know already slightly did already, but I don't want to compare the two yet. It feels too
Yeah.
early. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Sure.
think they are definitely the, it's you can tell they're fans of the Peter Jackson trilogy at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure the writers are going to be fans of the books.
They are. Yeah. I think so.
But I found it respectful, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is the best way to say it. There were a few glitches in there that I did feel in the initial output. So it wasn't that they did it too much in the Jackson trilogy, but there were the original Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Mm.
But there's something about it where they dive straight into mythic history,
Yeah.
and the voiceover, which is fully exposition, but it needs to be at this point. And
Sure.
we're familiar with this because of the world that it exists in. But they dive fully into, like, for someone who doesn't have the knowledge, like Morgoth, and
Mm-hmm.
the idea that Sauron isn't the leader here. And I don't know, there was a lot to take on in that first few minutes. I
Yeah.
found it was thrilling because it felt like it was washing over you, like this history. But
Mm-hmm.
I think for people who aren't really super into it, might go, "Oh, hang on a minute, what? Why is the stuff dying now?
Yeah.
Why is the things dying? Why is the light gone out in the elf land?" As people would call it. But it's
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
there's a rush into it, I found, which I
Mm.
found quite invigorating. But at the same time, I could see it might be easy to get lost in that. But very
Yeah.
quickly, it gets made up for with you're just immersed in the world of very a variety of different species and humanoid creatures that you've not met before. And
Yeah.
they are world building here, and
Yeah.
they knew that they had to, so they've gone for it. That's what it feels like.
It's a really interesting point that you raised there about the kind of the history and in that opening thing. I know a fair chunk about it. Quite I know quite a lot about it. I've read a lot of the stuff. I know what's going on there. Um, but it did consider, because there's been a big argument here. Maybe not, perhaps not argument. I'm going to try and figure out exactly how to put this. There's been a lot of conversation about how perhaps this isn't quote unquote Tolkien and things like that. I know if John were here, he would say, "It doesn't matter. I don't care. Just tell me a good story." And I can't entirely disagree with that. This is a different medium. It's a different thing. But there are a lot of people to please here, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And that opening section has to carry a huge amount, as you quite rightly said. Um,
Mm.
I agree with you. I think it's really effective, and it stuck out to me as well that perhaps there could be. I don't know if confusing is the right word. I think it's clear. I think it's clear what's going on, but it is a bit weird that I think if you were not understanding all of it, you might kind of sit there and go, "Oh, okay. Well, why aren't we dealing with this Morgoth thing? Who's that guy? Why are we not dealing with him? Why are we dealing with his like lieutenant? That's weird. Surely we want
Yeah.
the big bad, not this guy." Which, and that's sacrilegious to Tolkien fans, and excited for the comments. But the point being, for to look at it from purely a visual reimagining of this world through the realms of TV, and in that sense, I can see how people may struggle with that a little bit. And I think that's
Mm.
reflected in some of the reactions I've seen to this stuff of the people who were there. I think there is an element of perhaps slight bewilderment. I think being a little overwhelmed, may be another way of putting it, which again can understand because of this. I mean, this show really is a spectacle. It's quite something. So perhaps
It
it
is
was
a
a
whopper,
little.
isn't it? It's enormous.
It is massive. It is really, really massive. But on the whole, I think they introduce it in a really interesting way, and it feels.
Mm.
And I think that opening section, Galadriel's voiceover there, is exactly what this series is setting out to be. I think it is familiar, but with a twist. And
Mm.
when I went along for the Broken Sword, and I went along to this event a couple of months ago, and was chatting with the showrunners then, that was very much the kind of vibe that they were hoping to give off. And I think if nothing else, they have achieved that. Um, they have achieved this idea that this is familiar, but it is a wee bit different. But to get into it, there are multiple plot lines that are laid down here. Like we say, this is Act One. We are world building. There are various things going on. We've got Galadriel, as we've mentioned. She is obsessed with the hunt for Sauron. She's going to avenge her brother, and all of this, that, and the other. Really lovely performance, I think, from Morfydd Clark there. I think a very sort of emotionally raw Galadriel, which when you compare to a version of the character we've seen before in Kate Blanchett, it's very different, very interesting. Did you get on board with that performance? Did you get on board with the character?
So again, I think there's a level of growth you see in the first 20 minutes, 30
Yeah,
minutes,
yeah.
which is very interesting to see, because you see her as a child and then her as a young adult, and that is hundreds of years, if not more. I'm not
Mhm.
entirely sure of the how how the aging of elflings works, but
Sure.
it was a long, long, long time, and they were on the other side of the ocean, and there is a tremendous amount of character development that is implied but also shown. So
Hmm.
it's the fact that she's been alive so very, very long. By the time she loses, I'm guessing the person who's closest to her, which is her brother,
Yeah.
and you, there is a level of anger and fragility in it, which is feels really important for who she's almost certainly the antagonist, or will be the antagonist in this story.
Mm.
Feels really important to have that growth in there, but also the potential for further growth. So the fact that she spends hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years as like the effectively like a war lord,
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
literally
Yeah.
hunting down the evil in this world with no limits on her person, and then she's sent back to her homeland,
Mm.
and she's emotional in the
Yeah.
moment, and you can see the change in the character because of the incident that's happening on the screen, and it feels like well written drama.
Yeah. It
You're like,
does.
okay, she's been hiding her fragility to get this job done, but when she's faced with something as enormous as this, you can see her emotion, and she plays it very well. I've not seen her in much before, and I think she is going to be pretty enormous. Like, she has a great range, and I think we've got more to see from her in this series specifically.
Hmm.
But I think she's going to be a very big actress.
Yeah, I think you're right. She does that. She does this very well. But it is a well written character, and she is. There's a huge amount of, given that this is a about as high fantasy as you get. This is
Mm.
Tolkien, after all. This is the original fantasy guy, or certainly an interpretation of the original fantasy. Um, this is quite a very grounded character. You can see elements of sort of post-traumatic stress disorder peeking out there, and looking at
Mm.
this thing, amplified by great age and experience and longing and pain and all this, that, and the other. And she says at one point, many of her kin have forgotten the pain. And it's alluded to that Elrond has himself forgotten the pain, or perhaps was too young to experience it. And this kind of idea that she alone is the last sort of bastion of this thing. I will avenge, I will protect, I will, is very, very interesting. And
Mm.
I think the way the character is written is very subtle. It's not there is a risk with the fantasy genre that you can get away with putting everything out there and just being on the nose. You can get away with it because you just
Mhm.
have there's something about the language in fantasy series and things like that that means you can have a character look at another one and go, I feel distressed about the way this
Yes.
has happened. And they don't do that here. They shy, and I think actually the Jackson movies are guilty of that on
Mm.
occasion. There is a little bit of there is on occasion a lack of nuance to some of the characters. Legolas, for example, I don't get. But we did that in another episode of this, so I'm not going to go down that route again. But I feel as though Galadriel as a character, you feel the weight of her age, you feel the weight of her responsibility that she's given herself,
Mm.
and has been given to her by the High King, and you feel that there, and I think that's really really cool. I do have a quibble about something that happens with Galadriel, but we'll get into that later. This is not all positive. There are for sure, you know what I'm going to say as well. But
I know
there
what
are
you're saying.
things that there are things that don't quite work here. But I just want to carry on looking at this because there are so many characters here. There's so many kind of interwoven or plot lines that will at some stage interweave as we go through this. So we have our new Elrond as well, played by Robert Arameo. And we have this plot line here, which is Elrond the High King, the Elrond the politician, and his relationship with the High King, and then kind of going off to Celebrimbor and having all of this stuff going on, and but also his relationship with Galadriel is as well is very interesting. What do you feel about that? I thought it was quite interesting. I thought.
Yeah, I felt it was quite sweet between the two of them. I mean, you don't necessarily. I mean, you get a sense that they are linked in the Jackson trilogy. You know they're important to one another, but
Hmm.
there's a sweetness here that we haven't had before, and they're
Yeah,
younger, and there is a an innocence, although they're still ancient by our
yeah, yeah.
by our measurements. They are still young, and there is an innocence, and I guess there's a level of naivety to their the way they hold themselves, and I really liked that.
Mm,
I liked seeing them. Um, I think there's less of a worry of hubris in the versions of themselves,
mm,
and I quite like that. I quite like seeing them young. I don't like all prequels, but when
sure.
they're done well, I really like them. Like the Better Call Saul prequel I've mentioned quite a few times before. Like I
Yeah.
really like that. I really like how they've under undeveloped the characters in a way where you know where they're going, and I think
Hmm.
it's smart writing to do that. So you almost reverse engineer the character development to a point where you're like, okay, what would they be like in this period of their life, and why would they be like that? And then you
Yeah.
write it. And I think there's because these are such iconic characters, a lot of writing and rewriting would have gone into this.
Mm,
And I'm not entirely sure how they did it. I know there's showrunners and there's a writers' room, but I don't know if they were dividing shows up in the standard way, or
sure.
there are other ways of doing it where they do anyone with a certain amount of characters in it. They write them. There's a specific writer for that character,
Hmm.
and there's so many ways they do it. And this is, I mean, for example, even if you just look at the money they've spent on it, this is a
Yeah.
unique show. This is the most expensive show that has ever existed.
Mm.
Um, that doesn't necessarily make it a good thing.
No,
It
not
doesn't
at all.
necessarily mean it's going to be great, but there's a backing here that might mean it could be.
Yeah.
From what we've seen so far, I'm confident I'm going to enjoy this.
Hmm.
I definitely enjoyed the first two,
Yeah.
um, and the characters and the actors that are playing them seem well. They feel well cast. Their characters feel well written. As we've already mentioned, there's a level of conceit here, and I'm not talking about the conceit like the "haha, I'm hiding something from you." I mean like the like Dick Dastardly. I mean the writing filmmaking version of conceit, which is the audience has an acceptance of what's happening. They have an acceptance of the storyline, and they go along with it.
Yeah.
Um, and that was what we were mentioning about the history lesson flowing over you. Like we'll see, time will tell on that one whether a wider audience will go, yeah, it's cool. Okay, things are dying. Okay, that guy's bad. I think cool. Let's go with it. And then it's enough. It feels like it probably is.
Yeah.
But there is a level of it that I'm interested to see how it unfolds in the sort of the to a wider audience.
Yeah. I agree. I'm going to be really interested to see how this goes. And you're right. What they're doing here, which is smart, which is not something that all prequels do, is they are playing well with the dramatic irony. They are understanding that we know this stuff. So we know Galadriel, we know Elrond, we know who the dwarves are, They're called Harfoots in this, the kind of descendants of hobbits, but they're hobbits. We can see that these are, and again, very well designed as well. Very well, you can see that this is an earlier version of a hobbit. It's not, they're not in their waistcoats or anything like that, but it's the
The
same.
Hobbit, they're the ancestors of the hobbits, right? The hobbits are the
They are.
descendants of them.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
that. Yeah,
It's like all the river folk, or or
yeah,
whoever. Like it's
the
yeah,
halflings. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and you can
Yeah,
feel
they
that.
are, and it feels like they have a society in this. It feels
Mm,
like they've put a lot of effort into how would these people live, and they talk about the migration, which is basically them moving their camp
yeah,
every few weeks, and
yeah.
it's like great. I like that. I like it's in a language we understand, and it's new, so
Mm.
I like that. I like how they've done that.
And that's the thing, is that they can play on the fact that we know what hobbits are, and so how fun, how interesting to explore um what hobbits were thousands of years ago. What is this exactly, and how are this kind of the cornerstone of the Lord of the Rings books, films? How are they, how are they born? How do they come into us? How do they become the thing that they become to be so important in this world later down the line?
Mm.
And I think they are the Harfords. I really really enjoyed them. I really, really enjoyed them in this. I think that they are. Um, there's a wonderful kind of dialect that's sort of Irish, but also like um, West Country England, and
Yeah,
it's sort of, there's something, a really interesting dialect there, which has been chosen, which again is sort of, you can see mirrored later on in other adaptations and things like that. You can see the kind of the West Country vibe and things like that. It's a lovely,
yeah.
it's such a great choice. I think it's such a great choice to give them that voice, and the simplicity to them is just so great. But again, it's that dramatic irony. We know where they're going. We can see where they're going. We know where they are going to end up. How interesting to see what they were, and to see where they're. I've said all that already. I'm repeating myself, but it's a very cool thing. But then we get the stranger. So the stranger, and or
Mm.
meteor man, or whatever you want to call him, I think is a really great. Speaking about that dramatic irony and knowing where we're going, this is the moment of winking at the camera and going, come on, you think you know who this is, don't you? You think you know who this is. It's not gonna be, but you think you know who this is, because I think they are playing. I think they are making some effort to make us think this is Gandalf, and that was my takeaway from that. And I would put all the money I have on the fact it's not Gandalf, and that is putting, and all of the wonderful Lord of the Rings Tolkien scholars will be saying, well, of course it's not Gandalf. He arrived in the Third Age. This is the Second Age. There's no way it could be Gandalf. That's not what I mean. What I'm talking about is the fact that this guy, there are a few little things they do here in particular. So the fireflies are really important to this, right? The fireflies
Hmm.
are the thing that make you, because he's whispering to them and he's doing all that, which mirrors something
Yeah.
that we see with Gandalf doing later on. But then, crucially, the fireflies die, and we're getting this little tiny bit of foreshadowing that actually maybe this guy isn't so nice. Maybe this guy isn't so maybe this guy isn't the guy that we think he's going to be. What did you think about this? I'm babbling a little bit there. What did you think about that
So
character?
I think there's something very hidden about. I mean, everything's hidden about him at this
Mm,
point. But because of the death and because of the way he reacts in fear, I
hmm
don't think he's Gandalf. He might be Gandalf. I wouldn't be super surprised if he turned out to be. But I think he might be one of the big bads. I think he might. Could he be Sauron? Could he? Could he be? Because
Yeah.
I can imagine they've written in this idea that the Harfoots are caring for him. They want to make sure he's okay, and he turns out to be the biggest evil that has ever
Mhm.
lived. And
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a fear surrounding his character, and the when he jumps to, I guess he's defending himself, or he thinks he's defending himself. Everything gets scary, and it's like there is a tremendous power within him. And
Mm,
yeah, he he could be Gandalf. He could be someone else, like of a similar ilk, or he could be something much more dark.
yeah.
And I walked out of there going, "Oh, that guy's Sauron." Thinking back, there's a chance he's not. Like, of course, there's a chance he's not. But
Cool.
again, I'm not going to choke on my popcorn if it turns out he is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there is something very. There's going to be a big twist in this. And you were saying that the first two episodes are like the first act, and I totally agree. You've got your inciting incident. You've got, there's a point where the second thoughts about who they are, like Galadriel going home and then jumping off the ship and all this
Mm,
kind of stuff. Totally the first act. I
yeah.
really think there is going to be how many episodes are here? Is it eight?
8, I
Is
think.
it
Yeah.
eight we're going to get? I can't remember. I
Mm,
think it's eight. So yeah, we're going to spread over. If they are doing the three act structure, which it feels like they are, we're going to get 2, 4, and 2. So the next 4 episodes are going to be the act 2, and then the second 2 are going to be,
yeah.
sorry, the final 2 are going to be act 3. And I think somewhere in the middle of the next 4 episodes we're going to get a reveal of maybe not necessarily this is him, but there'll be a big signpost for people to try and guess who he is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We're gonna have There's going to be that big twist in the middle of I'm saying episode 6 or episode 5 or 6, we're going to
Hmm.
get some sort of big twist where we have a reveal.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't mean it's bad writing not to, but
No, no, of
there's
course.
a tradition to these structures that work,
Hmm.
and even now they still knock our socks off when it's
Yeah.
something surprising. We're like, "Oh, I didn't see that coming." It's in the middle of the third act. Like, you
Yeah.
should see it coming,
Should absolutely see it coming.
but
But that's when it
so in the
grips
middle of
you
the
like
second
that,
act,
though.
even. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why I've not got it right, because I'm looking in the middle of the third act. In the middle of the second act, of course it's coming, but there is. I'm ready. I'm excited about these reveals that there's going to be, because there's a lot of mystery surrounding some of these characters.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, we then get to so yeah, we had the stranger, we've had the Harfoots, dwarves, and Elrond going on to see the dwarves in Khazad-dûm. What a right, that was brilliant. What a fun time breaking rocks.
It
And
was fun.
it's a little bit, because it can, again, fantasy like this can get kind of a little bit self-important at times. It can get quite pompous. It can get kind of, the ages of past and blah 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 blah. And then
Yeah.
it's nice to check in with a race who are not quite so self-important and pompous like
Mm.
like perhaps the elves are, and to see them done like that. I do have a small thing that I think that dwarves are often used as comic relief.
Mm.
You look at the Hobbit trilogy, for example. You look at Gimli in the original Jackson trilogy. They can be, there are some cheap laughs to be had at their expense, and there is a little bit of that here, which is not. It's
Mm.
not necessarily a bad thing. It didn't take me out of it, but in the interest of being, um, of looking at all sides of this, I did feel there was a bit. It was a little, we've seen some of this before, and
Mm.
but of course we have, of course we've seen some of it before. It was a lot of fun, though. Did you share my objections? Not objections. Objections is way too strong of a word, actually. Just thought on that one.
So I really liked the balance of the second episode against the first. Like you say, there was a lot of talk about the past and the history of, and if that had carried on, I think it would have been a misstep. And it
Yeah.
didn't. It didn't. They stopped, and there was a little bit of foreshadowing at times, but it was there was plenty of that in the first episode, so they knew they had to change tack, and they did. It was a good decision. Um, I liked learning more about the dwarves. We've learned that they sing to the stone, which
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
I'm a a youngling as far as the full knowledge of Tolkien's concerned. But that was the first I knew of the dwarves singing to the stone, which is
Singing
quite
to
a
the
beautiful
stones. Yeah.
thing. And
Mm.
we saw, and I don't know if this is going to go out on TV, but we saw some flash forwards of the next few episodes where we saw some of this in action. So
Yeah.
there was, I thought that was very lovely. Yes, there is a level of comic relief with the dwarfs. I felt like that's been slowly decreasing as time goes on. So even in the Hobbit trilogy, like the way they tried to show Thorin And the level of, I mean, there was he was a hero's journey he was on
Yeah,
basically, but there was a level of respect that he gained from everyone around.
absolutely.
But he had to gain it, which was a bit weird. So that
Mm.
yes, I get what you're saying about the perception of dwarves in fantasy, but I think it's getting less and less. And I liked what I saw here. Like, yeah, the king is a funny guy. He's really funny.
Yeah,
He's oh, sorry, the prince even. He's a funny guy, and I like
yeah,
the idea that you feel you know quite a lot about their relationship without knowing anything about it.
absolutely. Yeah.
And for me, that's smart. That's really, really smart writing, because you
Mm.
want people to know something without telling them. And you don't need to know exactly what they've done together, but from seeing their first few scenes together, you understand they've had a strong history together, but they've fallen out. And Elrond doesn't really know.
Yeah,
And it's like, wow, this is brilliant. I like that.
yeah,
I like the idea that they put the life of a dwarf, or even someone, you could even compare it to a man, to a viewer. You compare it to a human, because the life of an elf goes on forever,
yeah.
and 20 years to them is nothing, but to us it is a lot.
It's a lot.
And you in this this heart to heart, you are in the physically, and the makeup of you is in the position of the dwarf.
Hmm.
So you are put from the position of the dwarf, which I think was a nice way to put this.
Yeah.
So I think the writing has developed, not eons, but it's developed a fair bit in
Mhm.
the perception of dwarves. And I really
Yeah,
liked seeing um, the world they're living in, and the relationships they have,
yeah,
and meeting the prince's wife and their relationship. And it was yeah, I liked it, and it was a different tone to the first one. The rock smashing was great.
yeah,
Like, you really feel like, yeah, every time someone smashes a rock, everyone cheers, and you feel like cheering as well. And
yeah,
that you feel like you're being pulled through it a lot. Yeah, I really liked
yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The Sophia is playing Princess Disa. Forgive the pronunciation error on that one if it's there. She is an absolute treat. She's
it.
so 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 great, and the way the two of them, there's a Wine Arthur playing Prince Durin. The way they bounce off each other, they elevate that writing. It's one of those things where you get two actors with great chemistry, who know their stuff, who know their character. It takes what you write to a whole new level, and it's such a joy to watch them play off one another, and to have that, again, the mannerisms, the body language, and everything, to have those two be so close and doing so much of the same thing, and then you have a very kind of stiff and again pompous Elrond sat just to one
Yeah,
side there. It's such a visual treat, and you're right. You get so much from it without them actually needing to tell us anything. Um,
yeah.
and and again, props to the there's some great dialect work going on here in the performances. Because there's that lovely kind of Scottish thing going on with the dwarfs, which it isn't a new thing. It's not like it's a revolutionary idea to make dwarf Scottish, but it's lovely. The specific dialect they've gone for, I think, works so well. Um, I'm
Mm.
big, yeah. I was a massive, massive fan of that, and again, the set design and everything, just an absolute treat. And I agree with you. I think the comic relief is well and truly kind of undercut um by the dramatic beats of that sequence and
Mm.
of those scenes, and you feel so sorry for him. This little guy, he sat there and he's got sad body, he's kind of
He's
hunched a
planted the
bit.
sapling. He's
Yeah.
planted the sapling, and he's secretly tending it. And yeah, I mean, there was a something in Elrond that I really liked, where there was a real glimmer in his eye, a level of mischief somewhere
Mm,
in there, which we did get a little bit with the Hugo Weaving version. But
yeah.
like, I don't know, he's younger, so it makes sense
He's
that
younger.
there's more of that in him. And you can see that there are times there where he's just doing his best to be honest and straight, and there are times there he's playing the room.
He's playing the
Like,
room,
oh, I
yeah.
must leave now, and he knows they're going to ask him to stay.
Mm.
Like, he knows what he's doing when he goes in there for dinner. He knows
Yeah,
he's getting dinner,
yeah.
and there's a glimmer in his eye, which I really like. I really like that he's a developing politician,
Mhm.
but there's also a cheekiness within
Yeah,
him and a playfulness, and I think we're going to see how that develops as the series goes on.
yeah.
Because again, being a prequel, we know what the characters, or
And,
some of the characters anyway, we know where some of the characters, the elves in particular, are
yeah,
going,
yeah, sure.
because we know what they end up like, and we know what their fate is
Mm.
to a point. And I think there's they're gonna have to write into that. They can't write away from that. They're gonna have to
No,
write
no.
into it. So I'm quite looking forward to what they do, to what they do with the elves and anyone else that we know that
Mm.
pops up that is going to be in the future that we've already seen.
Mm.
I like to see where they're going with it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's what's such a treat. It's my last point on Elrond, and it just echoes what you're saying, really, because I just agree. He's not done yet. He's not sort of he's not he hasn't his it's the almost arrogance of youth and the hubris of a young man who knows his stuff. He's good at what he does, but he hasn't got it down yet. He hasn't quite figured out all
Mhm.
of the details. And then, by the time he's Hugo Weaving, he is wise and he's Lord Elrond. At this point in time, he's you can see it in him. He's got great potential, but he's not quite there yet. And he's a little bit arrogant, and he's a bit, like you say, cheeky, hubris, and the hubris that will become wisdom in time.
Yeah,
And I think
I really like that as a yardstick in his life when he becomes Hugo Weaving.
yeah, yeah.
That's a great yardstick. I'd like to have that yardstick in my life. When I become
Sure.
Hugo Weaving, I will be
When
a
you
better person.
when I grow up, when I become Hugo Weaving, then yeah, that would be a good yardstick in life, wouldn't it, to become Hugo Weaving? And then, so then there's the final sort of plot thread, and I want to delve into this because, again, if you if you're still with us, thank you for still being with us. The kind of what we were saying at the beginning about this being such a big show. This is why we are. I want to go through these plot lines and kind of look at these individual things because there's so much there. There's so much there to talk about, and there's so much there to get into. Um, and this is what we mean by this being big, because there is just so much going on in what is actually 2 hours of TV so far. It's really
Mhm.
impressive. The elves, the kind of the far flung elves in the Southlands who are watching over the humans that did something, whose ancestors did something very, very naughty years ago, sided with the enemy. I love that. This sort of, oh man, I don't know what it was about that, but there was something I just really loved about this guy. He just feels so world weary. He's been doing this for a really long time. He's been looking
Yeah,
over this same place, looking over these same humans. Um, and Arondir is he's obviously fallen in love with one of them, which I like. I like they didn't drag that out. I like they just went for it. They're like, yeah, he's in love with her. This is a thing, deal with it. This is what's going to
yeah,
happen. Um, I like they went straight for that, and I like that he's kind of again. You want to talk about dramatic irony? They say, "Oh, an elf-human relationship can never work." Well, 3,000 years in the future, look at what happens. Elrond,
yeah.
not Elrond, Arwen, and Aragorn. So again, lovely use of dramatic irony there. But he's a battle-hardened soldier, and he's tired, and he's sick of it, and he's not wanted where he is. It kind of gave me ideas of what it perhaps was like to be a soldier patrolling the streets of Iraq or Afghanistan or
Yeah,
something
I
like
mean,
that. You know,
they're
yeah,
occupying the land,
yeah,
and we've seen this in fantasy before, and it's never seen as a good thing. It's never seen as a good thing. It's
no,
always There's always a struggle there, and I think they show it really well.
yeah, they do for sure. They touch on it in such a nice way, and it's not a you get why they're there, you understand why they're there, and I think you sort of sympathize and empathize with the characters in the sense that because we know that the elves are I think they are perhaps playing on our preconceptions of what we know about
Hmm.
elves and things like that a little bit there, and kind of saying, well, we know the elves have got the best interests for Middle Earth. Why else would they be there? That's a nice thing. And so it's like
Yes.
I think they're playing on that a little bit. Um, in a really successful way because it is this occupying force. They are this occupying, as you say, this occupying force that are then recalled home. And as soon as they're recalled home, bad stuff starts happening.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Tolkien was famously not into allegory, but what does that sound like to you? The occupying force being summoned home because apparently the bad guys have gone, and then stuff goes really badly wrong as soon as they leave.
Yeah, I think there is a level of mirroring happening
Mm,
there, but I mean, it did, it is. It's not even a story. It's almost like part of societal development.
yeah,
Like, and it's not a good part of societal development. It's an awful part of it. But there
yeah.
there is a level of imperial colonialism that we know uh, can have a dramatic effect on an environment,
Mm.
even if the imperial force believes it's doing a good thing.
Yeah.
And you can see that he's struggling with that, and he understands that. And I like the depth of his character in this. I think there was some slightly clunky dialogue between him and got no name. Who's his love interest in
Um,
this?
I've also forgot Bronwyn. Bronwyn.
Bronwyn.
Yeah.
So there's
Now that
there's a-
you
there's a
mentioned that,
there's a
yeah.
level of, yeah, cheesiness to the dialogue because he's, it's sort of like, oh, I'm gonna I've said it in every way. Basically, he's talking about he loves her, but I've
Yeah.
said it in every way without words, and it's like, okay, I get what you're saying, but you don't even have to say that. You can
Yeah.
just you can just be
Yeah.
quiet,
Yeah.
or there are a million ways of saying that without saying that.
You can
You can
just be
just not say
quiet.
anything.
Just be
You
quiet.
can say
Just
it without
be quiet.
words again. Say it without words
Yeah.
again. But
Yeah, exactly.
there is the. But I think that there is a. It may have been by design that there's a clunkiness between two different races trying to
Mhm.
find their way through love. Um, but Bromwell's son, I'm calling it now. Elf ears under his hair.
You reckon
I'm
Alfie's under
calling it
there?
now.
Interesting.
Elf
Interesting.
ears under the hair. He's got that hair right down here, and we've heard, elves and humans can't have children together, and if they do, it ends in tragedy,
Mhm.
apparently. And they've been in love a long time,
Yeah.
and she has a son who doesn't
Yeah.
have a father,
He doesn't have
and
a
it's
father,
like,
yeah.
that's an elf child. That is an elf hybrid child. I'm almost certain of it.
So are
I'm
you
happy to be
saying
proven wrong, but why has he got the hair covering the ears? Like, why?
it's interesting. It is interesting. Are you saying
Yeah,
that this is Chekhov's Middle Earth genealogy? Is that what you're getting at here?
yeah, yeah. It's Chekhov's child. That's
Chekhov's
him.
child. It is Chekhov's child. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, because he seems to have a particular pull to the this funny sword, the sword hilt rather, that
It's
grows
the
at the drop
Sauron
of his
stick.
blood.
Yeah.
Sauron stick. Nice. You good at naming stuff. We should just have you name things
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I've worked in advertising for many years, so I just
That's
name
true.
stuff
Yeah.
all the time. Even if people don't want it named, I'm gonna name it.
You're gonna name it. You're gonna name the hell out of that thing. You're gonna name the hell out of that Sauron stick. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see where that goes because I I don't know. I like your elf ears theory. And Chekhov's child. I like that a lot. I wonder if he's gonna turn out to be one of the Nazgul down the line. I think he perhaps
Yeah.
will turn into perhaps the Witch King, something like that. I don't know why. I don't know what is giving me that vibe, but we've got a lot of this ahead. If this gets renewed, then
Mhm.
we've got a lot of this to come and a lot of years to unpack this stuff. So this kid will perhaps grow up, and I wonder. I could see that happening. There's something in him which is not entirely good, I think. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I like the mystery. There's levels of mystery. There are little breadcrumbs,
mm,
mysterious breadcrumbs they're laying in these first two episodes.
yeah,
And I hope it pays off. I hope they're right into all of them.
yeah,
Because there's nothing more unfulfilling than a stale breadcrumb that
yeah.
doesn't go anywhere.
There is nothing more unfulfilling than a stale breadcrumb. You're so right, Brad.
Stale
In so
breadcrumb.
many ways,
It's not even just a normal breadcrumb. It's not even a
stale
panko
breadcrumb.
breadcrumb. It's stale.
Yeah, you're so right. Now I'm gonna get into gripe territory here now because we've been extremely positive about this, and I think quite rightly because it's a very good bit of TV. Um, but I have one thing which is jumped out at me immediately, which annoyed the hell out of me. Galadriel on the ship to the Undying Lands. Why? Why in the first of all? I think it's right. First of all, actually, what I want to say, I know that this is a plot contrivance to get her to Numenor, to get her to all of this, to send her on her journey and to do all of the stuff she's going to do. I know that. I know that that's what that is. However, I don't think that the character they set up would have actually got on that boat in the first place because she had that one conversation with Elrond, and then it's been hundreds and potentially thousands of years that she's been doing this. She has one conversation with Elrond, and she's like, yeah, okay, I'll go to the Undying Lands. Fair enough. She's clearly not that into it when she's on there. So again, I just don't think she'd go. Once she's on the boat, I think that her jumping into what exactly was she planning? Was she's going to swim back to Middle Earth? She's in the middle of the ocean. Admittedly, we don't know how far out to sea they are at that point, but if it's the edge of the world, I've got to think quite far. It's got to be some distance away from shore. And she's just like, you know what? It's not that I've made my bed with this or anything. I'm going to jump into the sea because I've decided that now isn't the time. And I think that I just don't like that plot mechanic. I think it's a weird decision. And I
So
do have
I
no
think it was unclear. I think it was very unclear. Like with did the Undying Land die? Like when she jumped in, what happened? We've already seen the lights go out there, and then they
I
went to
think,
Middle Earth. So it's like what happened? What happened?
see,
So
I
that
know
is
the answer to
unclear,
that.
and I think that might be made clear in episode 3
Yeah.
because she has to get back and explain that to someone.
Hmm.
She has to explain this to someone. What they're going to say? What happened? Why did you jump off the ship? And then
Yeah.
she'll say,
Yeah.
there will be a level of understanding. But right now, I think we're in the dark,
Hmm.
literally in the
Yeah.
dark, because the light went out. And for me, that was unclear. I was a bit like,
Yeah.
I've got to wait. I've got to wait to find. Actually, I was a bit like, have I got to wait to find out what that is, or did I misunderstand what happened?
Hmm. That's
So
really, really interesting
yeah,
because
I didn't know if I'd misunderstood it or not.
I think that the light is a gateway. The light is a gateway to the Undying Lands that we see at the beginning of the
Hmm.
episode 1, where you have the trees and all this that and the other. They then leave the Undying Lands to go and face off Morgoth, etc., etc. And then the elves are allowed to then return to the Undying Lands when the job is done. I think is the idea
Mm.
generally. Very, very simply, please don't hate on me, Tolkien fans. I know there's more to it than that, but but I think so. That's really interesting that you say that because, in fact, the use of light there, it's a very beautiful sequence by the by, but the use of light there actually potentially is a little visually confusing because we've seen light go out before and that be a problem, and then to see
Mm.
light go out there, perhaps that does give a kind of a mixed signal. I I know that it's just a gateway because I just know that from knowing about the world. But I
Mm.
think that that gives me two bits of weight there for this point, is that it's a little unclear to those that aren't familiar, but also they foreshadow this moment by saying there's a song, you hear a song that you never knew you knew. And then they get to this, light appears, and the elves around Galadriel begin to sing, and this song that is very beautiful, and that presumably this is the song they never knew they knew. But
Mm.
she doesn't, and she's resistant to give the dagger and all this, that, and the other. I thought when I was sat there watching it that the light was going to emanate all around all of these people, and it was going to take all of them and leave Galadriel behind. and then she was going to end up on the
Okay,
boat
yeah.
on her own because it's not her time yet. We know
Mm.
from sticking to visual media, we know from the Lord of the Rings when Gandalf is sent back, he's sent back because until his task is done, and
Yeah.
we know that that's a thing that happens. If Galadriel's task is not done, then for her to be left on the boat to then, you know, go back to Middle Earth, I think would make more
Mm.
sense. I do, however, concede that her jumping into the water to swim back shows more agency on her part. It means it's a decision she made
Mm.
rather than a decision someone made for her. Um,
Okay, yeah.
which I get. I just think I don't know. I just it really bothered me. It really stuck out to me as a really weird decision because if you'd have everyone else absorbed by the light, she could have tried to sail the ship. She's like, right, here's the decision. I'm going back to Middle Earth, and she, the light fades behind her, and off she goes into the distance. Um, because she's been kind of sent back to until her task is done. You could then have her ship. You could have her bump into these people and pick up those individuals, and then her ship be attacked by the worm, and then she still ends up in Numenor. All of those things can still happen in roughly the
Yeah.
same way. And you could still show that there is a kind of an animosity between humans and elves. There are things you can do that would kind of come to the same ends, just without her making that decision to dive off the boat into the middle of the sea, albeit
Okay.
showing agency.
Yeah.
What do you
So
think?
that's super interesting because, like, if looking at it through my Lord of the Rings commoner eyes, but also my writing eyes,
Mm,
like, they align the light going out with the impact of a meteor or a stranger, which is a bad thing.
hmm
So it was like there was a cataclysm approaching. Everyone watched the thing approach. Everyone was like, "Oh my god, what is that?
Yeah.
It's a falling star. Like, what is this thing?" It impacts, and the light goes out, and she jumps in the water.
hmm
And for me watching it, I was like, "Oh my goodness, something's gone wrong here. Like something's
Mm,
happened. There's been a cataclysm. There's been a calamity. The meteor hit. They got wiped out somehow. The light's gone out, and she's swimming back to shore." That was how I took that.
yeah.
So that, I mean, again, not having the full knowledge of the world, like, that was how I received it. So is
Interesting.
that a glitch in this matrix? Is there something going on here where it's like you do need prior knowledge,
Mm,
but it did feel the type of writing they're doing, it did feel like there's something, it's going to be explained soon. At least
yeah.
maybe in the next episode. Like, there will be an explanation. Whether you need it or not is another question.
Mm,
But for someone like myself, I might need an extra little bit of, yeah, I jumped off before the gate
yeah.
closed. Whatever it is, it feels like there needs to be an extra thread in there
Yeah.
potentially.
I get that, and you shouldn't have to have foreknowledge of the Lord of the Rings text and the Silmarillion and unfinished tales and things like that. You shouldn't need any of that to watch this. I like it, so I do have it, but you shouldn't have to have that in order to dig into that. And I also it shouldn't be beholden to those things either. So it's that's really really interesting to hear it from that point of view. So yeah, okay. So not so maybe some things to be repaired down the line, but as you say, the chances are that they will identify that and they will go back to it. So fingers crossed that will be the case.
Mm.
I mean, look, I think we did it. This is a huge TV show. This is a huge moment, I think, in television, in visual storytelling. Not least because it is of the money that's been put into this. I don't want to bring it back to money because it's not all about money, but it is also kind of about money sometimes. And they put some money into this, and it shows the quality of the design and the craftsmanship that's gone into this. These are a lot of
Mm.
people working at the height of their power to bring something really very special together, and I think that's worth referencing. Yeah, I mean, here we are. It was great. I think we both enjoyed it.
It was wonderful. I had a great. It was a great time. It was great seeing all of the people who made this thing and the people who contributed and the actors and everyone who was involved. It was great seeing them sort of relish in the spotlight. Like
Yeah.
they were, that everyone was so excited to see this go out, which is lovely to see. Yes, they've spent a bucket load of money on it, which makes me want to just scream, "Don't mess this up!
Yeah.
Please don't mess it up!" So far, fair going. It doesn't feel like the messed anything up. It feels good. It feels like a familiar place, but I'm learning new things all the time,
Yeah.
and
Which is what you want.
I'm really looking forward. Yeah, that's what I watch TV for,
Yeah.
and that I'm looking forward to the next episodes. I can't wait. It's going to be very exciting.
Brilliant. Brad, thank you so much. The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. This has been hovering around for such a long time. It's so great that it's out and about. It's streaming on Amazon right now. We will be back weekly. Thereabouts. We may be a little bit late on next week's because I'm actually on holiday. But we will be back each week to chat Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. And to give you our take on it. We'll be going episode by episode from this point onwards. So please do come and join us as we venture back into Middle Earth after a very long time away. Thank you, Brad, and thank you to all of you for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. It really, really helps us out. If you've listened to us on audio, don't forget you can pop over to YouTube and check out some of our dubious cinematography work from the premiere itself. And again, thank you so much for listening. We love doing this for you guys. So yeah, thanks again, Brad. Until next time, everybody else. See you soon. Bye bye.